Zok Telig Mishnah. Shachtoi almanas loniach is damai. So we were learning the sugya of Rabbi Yehuda, which is the sugya of someone who made up to not do the avodah on time. So we always knew about two types of machshavas that could pass on a carbon, and that is a machshava of chutz l'zmanai and a machshava of chutz l'kaimai. Rabbi Yehuda introduces us to a new type of psal. Shakta amlas l'haniach estabay. You shakted it, and you weren't planning to do the avodah on time. Oyemurav l'makar to the next day, so you didn't have a positive kavanah to make the zrika chutz l'zmanai. You just had a kavanah not to do the zrika bismanai. Or another specific issue where you had in mind to remove the dam from the azara, which would make it possible, but you didn't actually do that. Rabbi Yehuda holds the mere machshava to do something like that will pass the carbon. But the Chachamim machshirim, because they stick to the two machshavas that the Torah lists, chutz l'zmanai and chutz l'kaimai. What about almanas litnon al gabi yakevesh shaloi keneged hayisoid? To spray the blood on the mizbeach, but in the wrong place of the mizbeach, or relitin as hanitnim lamailon lamata, ves hanitnim lamata lamailon, or ves hanitnim bifnim bechutz, ves hanitnim bechutz bifnim. So you were going to spritz the blood on the mizbeach, but in the wrong place on the mizbeach, or shayochlu tumeim. You had kavanah when you shechted it that whoever is going to eat this carbon will be tamei, or sheyakrivu tamei. Whoever will be makar of this carbon will do it when they're tamei, or sheyechlu arelim who are not allowed to eat karbanis, they'll eat it, or v'sheyakrivu arelim, or l'shaver atomais hapesach. The person shechting the carbon pesach thinks that we're going to break the bones, or somebody's going to break the bones of the carbon. And we know it says ve'etzem lo yisish b'ruboy, or lechol mimenu heimenu na, or eat from the carbon pesach when it's raw, right? It says al toichlu b'menu na, uvashim avushim l'mayim rak tzliyesh, or ula arev damay b'dam apsulim, or I'm going to mix in the blood with dam apsulim. All these machshavos kosher, they will not impact the kashrus of the carbon. She'ein machshava poiselas, the only machshava that passes a carbon is chutz l'zmanai v'chutz l'kaimai, or v'apesach v'achat shaloi l'shmon, and according to Rabbi Yehuda, the kavanas listed at the beginning of our Mishnah. Frank the Gemara, my time with Rabbi Yehuda. Where did Rabbi Yehuda get this chiddush from? That if you have kavana not to do the shrik on time, that will pass all the carbon. Omer Rabbi Lazar, trei kreiksi b'noisar ksiv. There's two psukim that are mentioned in reference to Noisor, referencing two different karbonos. It says, "Ksiv kasav echad omer loisoi siru mimenu ad boiker, v'chasav echad omer loyaniach mimenu ad boiker." So Rashi tells us in what sugya these psukim are. Chad b'pesach, chad b'toida. One is talking about a carbon pesach, and one is speaking about a carbon toida. Now the pasuk of Aloisha Siru Menu ad Boiker, by Noisha Menu ad Boiker, by Eishi Saref, is speaking about the carbon Pesach. Now there's a machlokes Rishonim if it might be referring to a different pasuk of Bayom Hu Yayach Aloisha Siru Menu ad Boiker, but that's the pasuk of Pesach. The pasuk of Toida seems to not be a machlokes, and it's Ubesar Zevach Toida Shalom, and the Gemara is going to dash this pasuk in detail. Ubesar Zevach Toidas Shalomov. B'yoim karbona yeachel lo yaniach mimenu ad boiker. So if you notice, there's a difference of expression from lo yisoi siru to lo yaniach. That's also something that the Gemara is going to elaborate on. So Zog to Gemara, we have two psukim telling us the isser of noiser. We don't need two psukim to tell us the same halacha. Imeinoi inyan lihaniach. If you don't need one pasuk to tell you that it's also to create noiser, to leave the noiser, then teneu le'inyan machshava sinuch. Let's say it's referring to machshava vinuch, and this is where Rabbi Yehuda gets his halacha from. Since there's an extra pasuk discussing noiser, therefore we will say it's referring to someone who merely thought to make noisa. Rabbi Yehuda, hi kra lahach Yehuda also. So you're telling me the pasuk, one of these psukim, is to tell me the halacha of machshava. Hi mi boyle lichatanya. We need one of these psukim, and specifically the Gemara is going to reference the pasuk of Taida. We need it to tell us a different halacha. It's not extra and available to tell you machshava sinuach. Lichatanya ubisar zevach toidas shlomo. Lamadnu, we learn litoida shenachelas liyom v'layla. We know that a toida, it's time to eat it is yom v'layla, the day that you shecht it, and the following night until the next morning. What about chalipin uvelados utmurais minayin? So what are chalipin? What are velados? And what are tumurais? So Rashi's chalipin is you were mafish a carbon toida and you lost it, and then you were mafish another one and you found the first one. So you were able to still use the first one. Now you have the second one, which is excess. That's what we call chalipin. The halacha with that carbon is you actually bring it, your makrib, and as a shlomo. Or veladais utmurais, the years to change it. So either a velatoida, if it was a female animal and it gave birth, so now you have another animal. Or if you have a tamura. So the halacha is, Rashi says, v'chulan kreitim. These are all brought as karbonis. We learned that you bring them as karbonis. So Zog Gemara Minayin, how do you know that? Because Talmud Omer ubisar. It says ubisar zevach toida shlomov. From ubisar we are being marba other karbonis. As Rashi says, the havelel michtav v'teidosoi v'yoyma yeyachel. Why did it say ubisar zevach toida shlomov? That's a very long way of saying what the Torah is saying. So therefore, havelei kra yisera lidrasha. Okay. Chatas v'osha minayin. We now learned chalipin, v'lados, and tmurais. How do we know that a chatas and an osham as well has a limit of a day and a night to eat it? Dr. Gemara, Talmud Omer zevach. So ubisar tells you that all these other types of toidos, the tamura, the chalipin, and the v'lados, your makrib. Chatas and osham, how do we know they have the limit of a day and a night? From zevach. Okay. Uminay l'rabish shalmei nozer v'shalmei pesach. How do we know to include shalmei nozer and shalmei pesach as Rashi shalmei nozer, which is the ayil nozer haton lechem kamoisa? So the ayil that a nozer brings, we refer to as shalmei nozer, and shalmei pesach is referred to chagigas arba osor. In addition to the carbon pesach, people on the Erev Pesach would bring a carbon chagiga. Avol shlomim ba'alma le'matzil l'rebuye. This pasuk is not referring to a standard shlomim. D'ksiv behedya behu shnei yomim b'yoyim zivchachem yiyachol mimachos. So we definitely not including a carbon shlomim in this pasuk of the zman achila being yoyim v'layla because it doesn't apply to a shlom. But it does apply to a shalom nozer and shalom pesach. Talmud Omer shlomov. So Bisar, Zevach, Toida, and then Shlomov is adding these Shlomim Nazir and Shalom Pesach. Lachme Toida, V'chalois, Urakikin Shebenazir Minayin. How do we know that all of these also have the same time limit? Talmud Omer, Karbonai. So it says in the pasuk Bisar, Zevach, Toida, Shlomov, B'yoim Karbonai Yeyachet. Kulam Kaira Ani Bahen. Lo yoniach. All of these items that we listed that are included in all these ribuyim have the prohibition of allowing them to become noisa. Frank the Gemara. So how does Rabbi Yehuda know on top of that a machshava of noisa will pass? Dr. Marcus Kain lemekra loisoi siru. My lo yoniach. In the parasha of Toida, it didn't use the word noisa. It used the word yoniach, which is an unusual language. It should have used loisoi siru. You don't need it for noiser itself. So, Rabbi Yehuda has a makar that even a machshavas hinuach would pass a carbon. If you look at the Mishnah, there were two separate cases where Rabbi Yehuda said a machshava would pass. A is the machshava to do things too late, but there was another machshava mentioned in the Mishnah, and that was lahaitzi. If you had kavanah to take the dam out of the azara, that kavanah would passel. How do you see that? Zok Gemara, hatenach laniach lahaitzi ma'ikal ameima. How is Rabbi Yehuda going to learn his halacha that a machshava lahaitzi will passel a carbon? Zok Gemara, b'yoid. Time with Rabbi Yehuda svarahu. Rabbi Yehuda's reasoning is a svara. It's not learned out of a pasuk. The Tanya, Amar Lem Rabbi Yehuda, the Brisa which elaborated on the conversation between Rabbi Yehuda and the Tanakama, quotes Rabbi Yehuda saying as follows: wouldn't you agree to me? If he actually left it till the next day, everybody agrees it will be possible. So I think we can extend that. Af chishev le'anichei should be possible. So that was Rabbi Yehuda's svara. Rabbi Yehuda held that if you have kavana to do something, it should be as if you did it. But if he clearly states that that's his reason, then we don't need to zichos psukim to support his reason. Let's rely on this svara. At the time of Rabbi Yehuda's svara, I'm not saying that I understand this svara. Like I don't know how Rabbi Yehuda saw to be able to extend a psul to even thinking about a psul, but that is what Rabbi Kiva says. Rabbi Yehuda says, and therefore we don't need to find a pasuk for him. Let's hear what Rashi says. The time of Rabbi Yehuda, it's not a limud from a pasuk. Alisvirla he holds the hoilo mifsel b'itza uvehinuach mifsel nami b'machshava soitza veinuach. Rabbi Yehuda holds that thinking about doing something wrong should have the same impact as if you did it wrong. So therefore, all of the Gemara that we learned until now, we don't saying that Rabbi Yehuda learns it from the extra expression of the Isser Noiser by Toida is not his reason, it's a svara. Frank the Gemara, so once Rabbi Yehuda has such a svara that if you have kavana to do something that's possible in the carbon, your kavana possible, so then why does he limit it to the two kavanas of hinuach and lahaitzi? There's many other things that you could think of to do wrong. So, okay, let's break it down to item by item. Behind niflig, which specific kavana do you want to suggest that Rabbi Yehuda should hold with pasel? B'shover atomas haPesach or v'lechel mimenu na? That wouldn't pasel the carbon because zivcha gufei mi mifstil. If you actually broke the bones of the carbon Pesach, or if you actually ate it raw, would it pasel the carbon? Avada. The carbon would still be kosher, and you would still be yoy to the mitzvah of your carbon Pesach. Norvash, you did a separate aveir. So such a machshava wouldn't pasel it because actually carrying out the machshava wouldn't pasel the carbon either. So let's try another one. Almanashu yechlu tameya v'sheyakrivu tameya. Once again, the same shaila. Ziv chagufei mi mivso. Even if someone tome was makriv de'imurin, it doesn't change the status of the carbon. The zrika was done to kashrus, the carbon's kosher. So thinking to do that surely shouldn't pass on the carbon. How about sheyechlu areilim v'sheyakrivu areilim? The same argument. Ziv chagufa mi mivso. So therefore, there any kavana where if you actually followed through on the kavana and actually did it, it would actually nullify the carbon and pass on the carbon. Yes, that's a machshava that Rabbi Yehuda holds would pass on the carbon. But a machshava to do something wrong, and if you did that thing wrong, it wouldn't pass on the carbon. Machshava to do that wouldn't pass on the carbon. Lishnachrina. There was another lashon in explaining Rabbi Yehuda called kiminei. How the reason why Rabbi Yehuda holds machshava doesn't answer is because you're shechting a carbon. You don't have the power to break the bone. The yedin should break the bone. You're not an oral. Yedin is the oral who's going to do the avodah. It's not within your hands to do it. So therefore, your machshava shouldn't pass. Zok Rashi, Lishnachrin kol kaminei mi yishmaloi lakriva b'pasol. Who said they're going to listen to him? Just because while he's shechting, he has some crazy machshava. Who said it's going to be followed through? Hakayadim tameim lo yishmuloi. The kayanim that are tamei, that are doing the avodah, they're not going to do the avodah just because he wants them to do the avodah. V'cheinu areilim lahakriv l'mizbeach b'avera or lechal kodesh b'avera. Hilchok ein machshavos and machshava v'davar atoli b'acherim. Something that's totally b'acherim, his machshava does not have any validity. Zok Gemara, what about the arev damon b'dam apsulim. Let me just see what the Bach says. La'arev damoy b'dam apsulim. What about that? That he could do. Rashi is la'arev damoy b'dam apsulim. Kulahai mishanuya. This is all part of the teretz. Klaimar the iflik b'la'arev dama. You know why that's not an issue? Because Rabbi Yehuda holds ein dam mevatel dam. Even mixing dam psulim wouldn't nullify the blood of the kosher carbon that you could put on the mizbeach. Right? That's what Rabbi Yehuda said. Remember, we had Rabbi Yehuda hold that in the Azara on Erev Pesach they flooded the Azara, and the Kohanim would take one cup of all, as one sampling cup of all the stuff in the Azara, and even though there might be dam tamsis or anything else, Rabbi Yehuda is in dam avatal dam. Even the ear of loy posel machshavas ear of nami loy posel. So therefore, anything that he couldn't posel, that which wouldn't be within his hands, within his ability to posel, his machshava can't posel either. What about litain esanitin lamaila lamata or lamata lamaila? Rabbi holds the Amar shaloy lim koimoi namoy mekoimoi karinabe. If you remember, Shmuel said when someone did that, Shmuel said that would still be a kosher carbon. You might not be able to eat the meat, but it would still be a kosher carbon because it says he brings a pasuk that says anywhere on the mizbeach where you spritz the dam, the eved will be maratz the carbon. Frag the Gemara, the lifloi v'nisnim b'fnim shenostam b'chutz v'nisnim b'chutz shenostam b'fnim. Why aren't those? Machshav is going to passel. So tomorrow, Kasav Rabbi Yehuda, but inan makom sheyeh mishulish bedam bebatzer uvevei murid. When we were learning about the psul of machshav shaloi b'kaimai chutz b'kaimai a machshav of pigol, the Gemara told us earlier that there was a shita who held that the only shaloi b'kaimai that passels is if the kavanah of shaloi b'kaimai was chutz l'beis hamikdash, chutz la'azara. But in the heichal itself, which is what we're talking about, nitnan b'fnim, meaning you had kavan to spritz dam that should have been spritzed on the mizbech hachitzon. Rather, you had kavan to spritz on the mizbech pnimi. That wouldn't even be a psul of chutz l'mkoimai, because davka has to be a makam shulish, a place where you could have once upon a time legally been makriv dam basar and emurin, and that would have been a chutz l'beis hamikdash. There was a time where you could be makriv dam basar demurim, which would have been on a bama, which is totally chutz l'beis hamikdash. But never, ever, ever was there a time where you could be makriv a murin and basar in the mizbech hapnimi. So therefore, it doesn't qualify as a place that we will consider a chutz l'b'koimai dika place. Okay, zog to Gemara weiter. Umi is the Rabbi Yehuda high svara. Does Rabbi Yehuda really hold of this svara? We have a brayso that quotes Rabbi Yehuda Omer, davar ra. It says in the pasuk, referring to a mumen, it says lo yisbach l'Hashem alekecha shor v'seh asher yeh b'mum. There's a lav to shecht an animal for a carbon that has a mum, koil davar ra, any davar ra. Kitayv Hashem alekecha. So what is this davar ra that we're talking about? Vatanya Rabbi Yehuda Omer davar ra ribakan chatos sheshachta b'dorim. You know what the davar ra is? You're supposed to shecht the chatos on the tzarat tzafon and the north side of the Azara, north of the Mizbeach. What if you had in mind to shecht it b'dorim, or v'chatos shenichnas dam alofnim? Now Rashi says chatos shenichnas dam alofnim means you had kavana to shecht the dam inside. You didn't act to spritz the blood inside. You didn't actually spritz it, because we're talking about vizavachta. We're talking about doing the shechita. So we can't actually be referring to an isser of actually taking the dam lefnim, because you're in the middle of shechting now. It means you're shechting with the das of bringing the dam lefnim. Psula. Zog to Gemara, davara. It says, "V'sibach l'Hashem alekecha shar v'seh sheyeh b'mum riba kan ashara shelo yishchot hachatas b'dorim." So first of all, there's an isser to shech the chatos, not where it should be shechted. And v'chata shenichnas dam lefnim kloimer loisis b'cheno al menas lahachnis dam lefnim. You can't have kavana during the shechita to spritz the dam on the inside mizbeach. The lav b'achnasa mamish kamazerlei. The lav of loisizbach is definitely not talking about bringing the dam inside the hechel. Ela b'machshavas achnasa. It only could be referring to someone who's thinking of doing that. The pasuk is talking about the shechita. The kakarle davara alma mivsal. If it says davara, you see it's possible. So al kalponim, you see from here that Rabbi Yehuda holds that if you had kavana to shecht, during the shechita you had kavana to bring the dam lifnim, it's going to be possible. So that's going to be a kasha. How could you say Rabbi Yehuda holds that dam being spritzed b'fnim wouldn't possible? Because how could you say the kavana to the kavana during the shechita to spritz the dam b'fnim wouldn't possible? Because it's not mishulash. You see clearly Rabbi Yehuda holds that it's considered davara. That's question number one. Now, I don't think I explained what this mishulash means properly. I just said mishulish b'dam b'basur v'emun, like the Gemara said. The word mishulish comes from the pasuk that discusses the Isser Pigel. It says a lashon of if you shechted b'yoyim hashlishi, because the pasuk seems to be talking about chutz l'zmanoi, but we said me'eno ina l'chutz l'zmanoi teneyu ina l'chutz l'koymoi. So the b'yoyim hashlishi is referring to chutz l'koymoi. So that's where the word shlishi is connected to the Isra Pigel. Another question we have: V'les lei leRabbi Yehuda shlishi. I mean, you're now arguing that Rabbi Yehuda holds that even if you had kavanah to spritz the blood in the heichal, that should be a problem because of davara, which means you're saying that he rejects the drasha of shlishi that we just discussed. That the only place where if you have kavanah to spritz the dam it would be possible is a makam shulush, which would be out of the azara. But having kavanah to spritz the blood in the heichal would not possible. So you're telling me Rabbi Yehuda rejects that because of the davara? Vatnan, I'll prove to you that he holds that there's no problem with spritzing blood inside the heichal. Vietnam Amar Rabbi Yehuda, hichnis b'shoigeg kosher. If you brought the dam into the heichal by mistake, the carbon remains kosher. So we could be medayik from what Rabbi Yehuda said. Ha b'mezit possible. So if you brought the dam into the heichal b'mezit, it will passel the carbon. It means bringing it along. But I have to take it back. Rashi is about to jump in and answer precisely your question. The kaimalon b'shakiper, and we're talking about when he made a zrika. So Rashi says, hichnis b'shogi kosher beper kol hazvakim shenis arvu. It says that if you brought the blood in its kosher, the kaimalon hasim b'gemara b'shilu pirkin, the hadud akinyon hamezit pasol is b'shakiper, like Duvi brought up. V'shenosan mimenu al mizbeich hapnimi hu dekapasol Rabbi Yehuda v'loy mislu b'achnasa. So Rashi directly addressing what Duvi brought up. Clearly, the Gemara says there that just bringing the dam into the heichal would not passel it. It would only passel it if b'mezid you brought it in and you actually spritzed it on the mizbeich hapnimi. The kamelon b'shakiper. So once we know that, let's make a kavachemer. Hashtag Uma Hosam Aili Aila. He actually physically brought the dam into the heichal. Nevertheless, what does the Gemara conclude? E keeper in, Eloi keeper Eloi. Unless you actually did this rika. So the kavana, when you're talking about actual actions, the action even requires an actual rika to passel. So hacha the chashuv cheshuvi. Here we're only talking about what he thought he would do during the shechita. He didn't actually do it. Like again, surely it wouldn't be a problem of merely entering the heichal. It would only be a problem at best if he actually had come on to make a zrika. So, but it's for teaching the Mishnah that our Mishnah that says he had in mind to bring it lefnim means he had in mind just to bring it lefnim, not necessarily to spritz lefnim. So I'll call upon him. We have a stira. Davara seems to tell us that the dam chadash and nichnas lefnim is psula. Merely nichnas lefnim is psula. Yet from this next Mishnah that we brought from the later on in the Masechta, it's quite clear that a machshava to bring down b'fnim wouldn't be psula. So we have a direct stira in what Rabbi Yehuda himself held. Zok Gemara, that's not a problem. Trei tanoi v'alibud Rabbi Yehuda. In fact, there is a machlokes tanoim what Rabbi Yehuda held about the machshava of bringing dam into the eichel. So our Mishnah in our sugya hold that bringing dam into the eichel wouldn't passel, and that's why Rabbi Yehuda held the machshava of it wouldn't passel. But lemaisa, we do have another Tana who argues and holds Rabbi Yehuda holds from Davara that the machshava to bring dam into the eichel will passel. Zok to Gemara b'savar Rabbi Yehuda chatos sheshachta b'dorim. So now we're going back to Rabbi Yehuda's drasha from Davara that if you shachta the chatos b'dorim is possible. B'savar Rabbi Yehuda chatos sheshachta b'dorim yehei chayiv, and we're talking about being chayiv malchus because it says loy sizbach. Loy sizbach is allowed. So are you telling me that Rabbi Yehuda would actually hold that you get malchus if you shecht a carbon b'dorim? Is that so? V'atanya. We learned in the Brisa, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Yochel chatos sheshachta b'dorim yehei chayiv. I would have thought that if someone shechs a chatos at the south side of the Azora, he's going to be chayiv malchus. Talmud loymar loy sizbach lashem alekecha sharvasa kol dovara al dovara at mechayvoy. We're only mechayivim for a dovara, which Rashi teaches is mum begoli shehu maguna kari dovara. We only give someone malchus for shechting an animal with a mum shebegali. V'yat mechayvoy al chatos sheshachta b'dorim. So we have another steer in Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda said from dovara, it's referring to someone who shechs b'dorim, and in this brayso he's saying dovara is referring to somebody who shechs an animal with a mum shebegali. I hear. Maybe there's a machlokes about Rabbi Yehuda says. I believe someone mentioned to address what Duvi said. Davar could, the way he could touch davar. I saw some maybe the Masechta reads down is that the word davar is mashma that it's let's have a look at this Tosfos because I think this Tosfos is what I was referring to. Yishleim davara mashma davar shura b'mokem achar. The who bekeeper. No, that's not what I was talking about. I'm sorry. So it's not. It's not somewhere else. The davar is referring to a loshon of dibur, a loshon of machshava. Because the way you understood is davar means something physical, something actual. There's actually something I saw someone who says that davara is bedafka refers to something that's a dibur or machshava. But we have that machlokes whether or not if someone shechs a carbon chatos, b'dorim if it'll be chayv malchus. Amar Baba, umoid Rabbi Yehuda is moida shechayzer v'koyvay lepigel. So let's stop a second. We know that something will not be pigel unless, other than this machshava of chutz l'zmanai, or other than this machshava of chutz l'koymai, the carbon is pristine. Now Rabbi Yehuda invented a new psul, the psul of thinking not to spritz the dam on time, the psul of thinking I'm going to take the dam out of the azor. So the question is, what if you had a machshava of chutz l'zmanai, and then you had a machshava later on during the shchita, you had a machshava of chutz l'zmanai, and then during the zrika or during the halacha, the kabbalah, you had to come on to take the dam out of the azor, right? So the question is this psul that Rabbi Yehuda invented, would that undo pigel, or maybe it won't impact pigel? So Rabbi Abba said, Rabbi Yehuda's moida shechayzer v'koyver lepigel, which means even if you had a kavanah during the shchita that you're going to take the dam outside, where the carbon becomes puzzle, according to Rabbi Yehuda, if during the Kabbalah you had a kavanah chutz l'zmanai, it would make it pigel. And the psul that you did with your first kavanah will not take away from the pristine kind of the carbon to disable it from becoming pigel. Chiddush. So Amar Rava Teda, I'll prove it to you. It's actually a logical argument. The pigel lifnei zrika loy klum. Let's say somebody has a machshava of pigel of chutz l'zmanai. He has a machshava during the shchita that he's going to eat the meat chutz l'zmanai, right? Right now, it's not pigel. the pickle is hovering. It's not pickle yet because you didn't finish doing the avodas properly. Until you actually do this rika, the pickle is not really chal because we don't know yet if the avodas will be completed. So Zok Rava that the pickle of Chneis Rika Leklamu. Really, before this rika is completed, the pickle was not yet permanently landed on the carbon. It's floating there. The Asher's rika v'kaval of a pickle. What makes the kvias for the pickle? This rika does. So therefore, the logic is that the fact that there's another kavanah there shouldn't make a difference. So let's have a look. I'm sorry?
Why was it?
Meaning, even if you had a machshava of taking the blood out of the azara, it wouldn't break the pickle. It passes, or normally another psul makes it ois pickle. This psul of Rabbi Yehuda won't make it ois pickle. So let's see Rashi. Amar Rabbi Teda, Teva de machshavas hinuch Rabbi Yehuda is lav ki machshavas chuslam koimai v'shaloi l'shmoi, because those two machshavas would break the pickle. Lafukim v'dei pickle. And what's our logical argument? The hapigel, the sheichet almanas lizrak is damay lemachar. Let's say someone shechted almanas to spritz the blood tomorrow. So that's a machshava of chutz lezman. Now, lefnei rika, before he actually does this rika, lav klumi. It's definitely not going to be pickle yet because we haven't finished doing the carbon perfectly. The eina machshava moyelas, the machshava of his chutz lezmanai, the machshava to spritz the blood tomorrow won't have an impact until he spritzes the blood today. Achi yizrek hadam hayoim. The ba'inon karvu kol matira. In order for it to be pickle, we need that all of the processes of the carbon was done properly. Nevertheless, the first machshava that he had of pickle, his first machshava of pickle that he's going to spritz the blood tomorrow, also contains in it a machshava that he's not going to spritz it today, right? If he's planning to spritz tomorrow, obviously he has a machshava, he's not going to spritz it today. And therefore, the chizar klei, when he actually does spritz the blood today, also zrika, the zrika comes, the kavai pickle, and makes him to pickle. We don't say, pickle, since pickle wasn't chal till the zrika, if it should be possible with the fact that he didn't intend to spritz the blood today. The chizar klei, pickle shouldn't be chal anymore. Because if you're going to tell me that the kavanah of hinuach will be moitzit with a pickle, every chutz lizmanoi is by definition also a hinuach. So therefore, how would pickle of chutz lizmanoi, specifically if the kavanah was to spritz the dam chutz lizmanoi, how could that ever be chal? There's always there's always the kavanah of a hinuach built into that minei ubei. So therefore, as a krava take the pickle of nezrika. We also zrika of a kaval of a pickle. So that's how I know that the psul of Rabbi Yehuda won't take away from pickle. But it's actually faulty logic. You know why? There's hasam hu chada machshavahi. When you have a machshava of spritzing the dam chutz lezmanoi, it's one machshava. But hacha three machshavas. But if you have a separate machshava of hinuach and a separate machshava of chutz lezmanoi, there maybe it would pass. As Rashi says, but he had straight machshavas. He had first a machshava that he wasn't going to spritz the blood today, and then he had another machshava that he's going to spritz the blood tomorrow. The first machshava was not called pickle; it was called regular psul, according to Rabbi Yehuda. So therefore, maybe the machshava of hinuach will make it ois pickle. Okay, Gabalti. Esrei Rav Huna Rababa. Rav Huna has a kash on Rababa. What did Rababa say? Rababa said he's moida shechayzer v'koyvoy lepickle. Rababa held that even though I have a machshava of hinuach, it could still become pickle of chutz lezmanoi. So I could have machshava, I'm not spritzing the blood today, passes it. Then after that, I could have machshava, I will spritz the blood tomorrow, and it will become pickle of chutz lezmanoi. What's this kasha? It says, "Litin is hanitin lamaila lamata, lamata lamaila." If your kavanah was to do it la'alter, to do it today, so therefore the only thing off in your kavanah is where you're spritzing, where you intend to spritz the blood. But there's no problem of a pigel of chutz l'zmanoi, because la'alter he was planning to do all this today, kosher. That makes this carbon pristine, because having kavanah to spritz it l'mayla or l'mata, everybody agrees, has zero impact on the carbon. So he is a perfectly kosher carbon. He had kavanah that he's going to spritz it l'mayla or l'mata, but he had kavanah to spritz it today. Everything is fine and dandy. Now, after that, he had another machshava. Chazer v'chishev chutz l'mkoyma. He had a machshava of pigel. So the halach is possible, it will be possible bein beikaris, because there's an active pigel of chutz l'mkoyma. The rule of chutz l'mkoyma is possible bein beikaris. What if after he had this kavanah of litness on l'mayla l'mata l'alter, he then had a machshava of chutz l'zmanoi? So then that's real pigel, because other than his machshava of chutz l'zmanoi, this is a perfect carbon. Chutz l'zmanoi pigel v'chayavin l'karis. That's the first half of the brisa. The second half of the brisa is l'mochar. What if he had in mind during the shechita that I'm going to spritz the blood tomorrow, but not on the right part of the mizbeach? That's already possible, because v'balti at kavana to spritz it tomorrow, it will possible, and therefore chazer v'chishev bein chutz l'zmanoi bein chutz l'mkoymoi possible ve'im beikaris. So you see that the fact that he had a kavana, to passel, the fact that he had a kavanah to passel will mess up the pigel, and therefore the chutz l'zmanoi later wouldn't work. So clearly, tiyufta, there have abba tiyufta. You see quite clearly that once there's a psul in there, it passels it. Let's see Rashi. L'mochar passel. Chishev l'itein l'mochar esanitin l'mata l'mayla. So while he's shechting a carbon, he had in mind that I'm going to make this rika on this carbon tomorrow, but in the wrong place on the mizbeach. Now, we already had this sugya. Zok Rashi will kimna b'perek sheni. We already learned in perek sheni that the reason why this is possible is mishum machshavas hinuach Yehuda. The reason why his kavanah to spritz it in the wrong place tomorrow is going to be possible is because I'm having kavanah also not to spritz it today. So that's what passel the carbon. V'loy mishum machshavas nesinas mocher. Them came pigel me boile. Right? The Gemara asked over there, why isn't that pigel? If I have kavanah to spritz the blood tomorrow on the wrong part of the mizbeach, that's mamash chutz l'zmanoi. The teretz, the Gemara said, that since his kavanah was to spritz it tomorrow in the wrong place, it's not a chutz l'zmanoi. It's only the psul of Rabbi Yehuda. And you see that once it suffers from the psul of Rabbi Yehuda, it can no longer become pigel. Amal have a pigel, the zrika, the lekasher, bachila, le'asel de pigel. A zrika that he was going to make that wasn't the proper zrika, once he has that kavanah to do it, it can no longer become pigel. The katani chazav v'chishev boy. It says in the Brisa that even if he had a kavanah of a chutz l'zmanoi, after this kavanah, it will not be pigel. Amalei mikvah su pigel. So you see clearly that the psul of Rabbi Yehuda preceded the pigel, would not be able to be pigel, which is not like what Rabbi Abba said. So you have a right from this brisa against Rabbi Abba. Gewaltig. Amar Chista. Amar Vina Bar Sila. What happens if Chishev sheyachlu tmeim lemocha? He had kavanah that tmeim are going to eat it tomorrow. So the halach is it's pigel. It says the word chayav over it's pigel. Rashi says pigel. V'lo yamrina lav machshavahi. You don't say that's not a proper machshava of chutz l'zmanoi. Dachilas tmeim lechazi, and therefore v'ava k'mechashev machsheves psul. You don't say it's like you had a kavanah psul and it's not a machshava of pigel. Rather, you say that it's a proper machshava of pigel. Amar Rav, I'll prove it to you. The basar lefnei zrika lechazi. No basar is mutter to be eaten before the zrika. And when you're having your machshavas pigel during the shchita, during the ilacha, during the kabbalah, it's all about meat that's not ready to be eaten yet. V'chi mechashav loy mivsal. Yet, if you have kavanah to eat the basar chutz l'zmanoi, it will be possible. Zakra v'loy. You can't compare the two. Hasam zarku michsi. When you're having a kavanah's pigel, when the meat's not mutter to eat yet, yes, it's not mutter to eat yet, but eventually it will be mutter to eat. But But if your kavanah is to eat the meat as a tamei, that will never be allowed. So therefore, could be having machshava to eat the meat chutz zmanu as a tamei, could be that would not be a machshava pigul. Amar Chisda, Margale b'pumei Rav Dimi bar Chidina. Rav Dimi bar Chidina used to regularly say, Basar Pesach shaloi hutzla. You have Basar Pesach that you didn't eat with tzli, which is how the Torah says it needs to be eaten. Or v'lach meitoida shaloi hormu. Or lach meitoida, even after you bring the carbon and it becomes mutter, before you're allowed to take your lechem, you have to give some to the kohen. You didn't do it yet. The halach is chayovin aleim mishum tumah. If you eat them with tumah, you'll be chayiv. Zot Rashi, im achla metumas haguf, you'll be chayiv. Even a tar is not supposed to eat it. A tar is not allowed to eat from the lachmi toida before the kohen gets his chelak. And we also know that a tar is not allowed to eat basar pesach if it's not sli. So if it's not a proper chila, we learned if a tar would eat it, kol tar yachal basar. If a tar is allowed to eat it, then you're mechuyev if you eat it when you're tamei. But if even a tar can't eat it, you're not mechuyev when you're tamei. So in these cases, a tar would not be allowed to eat it. So why would you be chayiv b'shum tumah? Dr. Rashi, im achlin b'tumas haguf v'avagav the kaim alon she'nitul l'torin ain't chayav no b'shum tumah. Even though we know that if something's not mutter for torim to eat, someone who's tamei won't get a law for eating it. Here it's different. Hi, Dr. Rashi. Even the Izrik dam, once there was dam spritz for the carbon pesach, even though you're eating meat not prepared properly, but the zrikas dam happened already, nitar l'taharin karinan bay. We consider it nitar l'taharin. The avagav dein pesach nechal el tzli, or v'chalas hatoida asher yurmu. Nevertheless, the heter of the carbon that we're talking about, that you won't be chayiv for tumah, is only before the zrika. After the zrika, even though there's some details that need to be dealt with, that doesn't mean it's not called royul achila to a tar, and therefore a tumah will be chayiv. Amar Rabbi Teda, the Tanya we learned. It says Asher Lashem. So let's look at the pasuk inside. Nefesh Asher toichel basar mizevach hashlamim Asher Lashem v'tumaser elov v'nichvus ha'nefesh ha'imeyamel. So Asher Lashem tells you l'rabbis emurei kadeshim kalim l'tumah. It's marba even emurei kadeshim kalim. If you eat emurei kadeshim kalim, which you're not supposed to be eating, if you ate them b'tumah, you're also going to be chayiv carbs. Alma, what do you see from here? Avagav the law b'nei achila nilu. Even though you're not allowed to eat them, chayovin aleim, you're chayiv for eating them when you're tamei mishum tumah. Why? Because the zrika was done already, and whatever they're supposed to do, now you could do it. In other words, the imurim, what are you supposed to do with it? You're supposed to put on the mizbeach. It's being clear to be put on the mizbeach because the zrika was done. Hakanami, avagav the law b'nei achila nilu. Even though you're not supposed to eat the meat of a korban pesach that wasn't sli, you're not supposed to eat the chalas of a toida if the kohen didn't get his chelak. Nevertheless, chayav nolei mishum tumah, because the zrika was done already, and they're cleared to be done with them what needs to get done. But v'lohi, you still don't have a raya, because hasam a murei kadeshim kalam hazu legavoya. They are perfectly ready to be served up legavoya, which is what is supposed to be done with the murim. Lafugi basar pesach. But basar of a carbon pesach, which was not prepared with sleep, these aren't roy for anybody. They have to be roy for at least somebody in order for you to have a chiyuv for eating them when you're tummy. That's one pshat. The other pshat is lishnachrina ha'emurim loy chazu ha'emurim loy chazu v'loy hanachazu l'masayu. Sure, you're not allowed to eat murim, but whatever the murim is supposed to do, they're right for that. The murim could be placed on the mizbeach. But the meat of the korban pesach that wasn't prepared properly may not be eaten by anybody. The chalois shaloi hormu are not allowed to be eaten by anybody, and therefore could be if someone ate them, but tomasa they would not be chayiv paris. Baruch Hashem, we finish it the parak. But l'neder had l'chal psulim, l'neder had l'chal psulim, l'neder had l'chal psulim. Let's chap around the mishnah. Bishami says, Kolan nitnin al mizbech achitzon. Anything that you were supposed to put on the mizbech achitzon, which means like dam, we're talking about zrikas dam, b'matana achas. It was supposed to have one matana. I'm sorry, b'matan achas kiper. So let's say you needed to do shtayim shem arba. There's a lot of karbonos that the zrikas dam is shtayim shem arba, which we know you put on two opposite corners and it splits into four directions. What if you only put it on one corner? So you were supposed to put it on two corners, you only put it on one corner. The halacha is kiper. That would still be good. But the evid, that's enough to be yoytes zrikas dam. Uvechatos shtei matonos. By a chatos, you're supposed to put one drop of blood on each corner. If you only put two, that would also make the carbon kosher. That's what we holds. We still learn av chatos shenosna maton achas keeper. Even the carbon chatos, if you would just spritz one bit of blood, it's going to be bechaper. Therefore, im nosenes a rishono ketikna. Let's say the first spritz you did properly with a proper kavanah, and after you made the zrika of the first drop of blood on one keren out of the four, the next one you did it with a machshavas pigel. Keeper is still a good carbon and it's not pigel. Because you can't make it pigel after the zrika. Pigel could only be done until the zrika. Once the zrika is done, you can't do pigel anymore. And since the zrika is considered complete, even after only one spritz, you could not make it pigel anymore. But the nasanas a rishayna chusl zmana, there's a shniya chusl b'chayma, that will be pigel the chayav and love chorus, because once you did the rishayna with chusl zmana, the fact that you did the second one chusl b'chayma doesn't matter, because it already had the ritzuy of the dam, and it's too late to have any impact on pigel. All of the dam that have to be put on the mizbech hapnimi, shem chiser achas mina matanois ki ilu lekiper. Those, every single matana has to be done exactly as prescribed in the Torah, and therefore, if you even missed out one, it will not be a ritzuy for the carbon, which means they're all needed. Therefore, they can all cost pigel. Lefichach nosdan kulan ketiknan va'achas shaloi ketikna psula ve'im because you had to do them all. And if the whole avodah didn't get completed properly, it cannot be pigel. Where do we know this from? That you can just give one matana of dam, even though the prescribed is to do more, one will be enough for the evet. Rashi says yishafech means shvicha achas mashma. So mashma you could be yoytze with even one shvicha. With the likes of saviv, it doesn't say yishafech saviv. It just says plain yishafech. The alfinim neshtei matana shenarba the parak is on Makaiman, where it says when it says saviv it means multiples. But dam is yishafech tells you as a bare minimum one matana will be enough. Okay, we'll stop here by Hashem and we'll be mamshach tomorrow.